This is an unrehearsed program. The views expressed are those of the guests and not necessarily those of the producer. Today's topic:
lack of transparency in the Indian democracy in Passion for Truth award-winning program.
Welcome to another edition of Passion for Truth. Recently, Sonia Gandhi, leader of India's Congress Party, announced her resignation from Parliament as act of self-sacrifice. Earlier, she had renounced the job of India's Prime Minister and handed it to the current Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh. Does this suggest a lack of transparency in the Indian democracy? We'll ask our panelists next. Dr. Dennis Warner, representative of Pax Christi, the International Catholic Peace Movement, also senior advisor, technical advisor to Catholic Relief Services. He is a specialist in water supply, sanitation, and environmental health with experience in more than 50 countries. Con Singh Delonge, former senatorial aide, managing partner, Regent Company, also recently elected president of the Mount Vernon Lee Chamber of Commerce. Retired Ambassador Jonathan Dean, advisor on international security issues, also president Union of Concerned Scientists. Shakur Ahmed, Chief Executive Officer, We Empower Incorporated. Tim Ferriss, a news commentator and a legal analyst. Welcome you all.
Thank you.
Starting with you, Tim, how do you read such retreats?
What was the question?
Sonia Gandhi resigned recently, and was it an act of self-sacrifice?
It's playing shuffle the faces. When Sonia decided not to be Prime Minister, she said, that her family was a consideration, that she was afraid that she would leave her children orphaned. She's moving on. Her children are still in Parliament. The dynasty will be there.
She will continue, Shakur, to run from behind the scenes and
Absolutely.
Then seek re-election in 6 months maybe and come back to the Parliament?
My company has done some work in India in terms of bringing some sort of transparency and opening up communication channel between citizen and elected official. And what I see is Sonia as particularly on the ground, the dynamics are playing against her because she was foreign born.
Yeah.
But what I found out over the time is she has been a tremendous and amazingly good politician. And I think every time she gets into a situation where it becomes difficult, she turns around, and I think this is another demonstration that she is bringing the best of Western democracy and some of the challenges which are being faced in India. And I think it's going to really help the Congress Party, and she's going to probably come back and much more stronger.
Ambassador Dean, if she was caught red-handed, holding a position that she was not supposed to, she should be held accountable. I mean, rather than claiming the moral high ground, as you know, that she had to resign because she was holding two positions and she was not supposed to hold a position of the prophet.
Well, she met the requirements of the law by resigning, it seems to me. And what we're discussing here is a rather keen tactical sense on her part, which seems to keep her in balance and more or less with some control of the situation. I think it doesn't show a lack of transparency in Indian democracy that this happened. It shows transparency in Indian democracy that she was forced out of the Parliament because of these regulations, which she had to respect.
But they had cleverly exempted Mrs. Gandhi from the ban on holding multiple positions.
Yeah, but I guess the power of public opinion required some adherence to the regulations. So this is really a triumph of Indian democracy rather than anything else, I think.
How do you read it, Kansi?
Well, I would say that we're dealing with an extremely astute leader who's transcended many speculations as to her ability and her capability to lead, and making the move that she has is a very strategic one. And rather, as you look at it, a good leader has to be a good follower. And she understands how to support the structure she has. She understands how to support the nation that's being built. And last but not least, she understands how to keep herself out of hot water. What may have been coming down the pike is something that she's addressing now rather than allowing it to happen later. So I think from a politically strategic view, we need to think of this as her knowing the strategy, knowing what's happening, and being actionary and not reactionary.
She does, however, remain the power behind the throne.
Yes.
Does this reflect, Dennis, a continuing weakness of Asian democracies? I mean, the democratic leaders continue to disregard the rules. In this case, for example, she was holding two positions and she was not supposed to hold the other position. And she was forced out of the parliament in that sense. But is this a weakness of the Asian democracies in general?
No more than here.
Actually, I see this as a strength of certainly the Indian democracy, that a leader backed out before a problem could get to the point where it became divisive for the country as a whole. And I think this points up, as several of my colleagues here have already mentioned, this points out her astuteness as a politician. So she knows when to hold them and when to fold them. Whether she comes back again and stronger, that remains to be seen. I don't know. But I think she recognized her own unique position of being foreign-born in a country that has never had that type of a leader before with the other political issues. It was time to back out and let the process move forward without her.
And you have to look at the results of where the country has come since she has come into power or taken herself away from certain powers. The country hasn't been declining. It's been inclining.
How do you read that, Tim? Tim?
Well, there's a lot to be said for her removing herself, and that's probably a good thing. However, there are a whole lot of other officials who are sitting in corrupt positions, who are doing all sorts of things, and many of them are in Sonia Gandhi's party. How effective can she be, even as the power behind the throne, in saying, we've got to clean this?
Shakur, Indian Americans, as you know, and Indians are among the world's richest people. And yet they do not expect accountability from their government in terms of enforcement of rules, enforcement about corruption and all those. How do you read that?
Well, I guess, part of the challenge, I think, is particularly in India, as I travel quite a bit. I have an office in Hyderabad. One of the challenges is, in order for democracy to thrive, in order for the government to be transparent, you really need to have people who are fairly educated, who are always taking the government to the task. I think that's the part which is missing in Indian democracy. Although it's reasonable, the institutions are strong, there is fairly good strength there in democracy. However, until the people are empowered and educated and understand, you could probably have that challenge, I think, in next maybe 10, 15, 20 more years, because whenever I ask this question, I see, people are being able to throw people out of power, and the parties have been changing, and I think that's the challenge, and I think that's where I think the leadership has to really come a little bit more stronger. And also, one of the challenges I see is the young generation who's coming up in India are not really trying to go into politics, and you see a lot of that old generation. I think when you see new generation coming in, you probably would see a whole lot of change and difference, and hopefully by then the citizens will probably be a little bit more educated, and you'll see that's going to disappear.
The fact, though, that you can get rid of this batch of politicians and put in that batch of politicians doesn't necessarily mean anything.
That's the central point of democracy.
Yes, and you need more than that, because you have cases like Mexico. They got rid of the PRI because it was corrupt. They put in PAN. Guess what? It's corrupt. Nothing really changes. For a lot of the minorities in India, the Sikhs, the Christians, the